We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Perfect Lies. Desmond Reeves had always been methodical. His fellow contractors often joked that he could plan a house's construction down to the last nail. But that precision was what made Reeves Construction the most sought-after luxury home builder in Oakdale County. At 42, Desmond had built his company from scratch, turning a small renovation business into a multi-million-dollar operation through sheer determination and an unwavering attention to detail. When he first met Valentina Russo at a charity gala 6 years ago, something about her magnetic presence had disrupted his carefully ordered world. With her striking amber eyes and razor-sharp wit, Valentina didn't so much enter rooms as command them. The daughter of a moderately successful restaurateur, she'd carved her own path as an interior designer whose bold choices had earned her features in several regional magazines. "You build them. I'll make them beautiful," she'd said on their third date, her voice a velvet promise that had resonated through him. Their courtship had been intense and swift. Within a year, they were married, and a year after that, their daughter Lily was born. Desmond had thought his life was finally complete. The successful business, the beautiful wife, the perfect child. But perfection, as he was learning, was just another word for a lie waiting to be exposed. The first sign had been subtle. Client meetings that ran mysteriously late. Texts that Valentina shielded from his view. Weekend workshops that seemed to multiply. He'd brushed it all aside, trusting her implicitly. After all, her design business was thriving alongside his construction company, and they had begun collaborating on high-end projects that were earning them both acclaim. "You're working too hard," his younger sister, Naomi, had told him over lunch one day. "When's the last time you and Val went on a real date?" Desmond had realized he couldn't remember. He and Valentina had become ships passing in the night, exchanging information about Lily's school schedule and client meetings, but little else. The passionate discussions about design and architecture that had once kept them up until dawn had faded into mumbled good nights before they turned away from each other in bed. That evening, he'd stopped by a florist on his way home, selecting an arrangement of exotic orchids, Valentina's favorite. He'd picked up Lily from his mother-in-law's house, coached her on surprising Mommy with a special dinner, and spent the afternoon cooking Valentina's favorite osso buco recipe he'd learned from her father. When Valentina walked through the door 3 hours late, her hair disheveled and lipstick faded, Desmond had felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Work emergency," she'd explained, barely meeting his eyes. "The Westlake project is a disaster." The Westlake project, the same one she told him last week, was practically finished. "Mommy, we made dinner," Lily had exclaimed, running to hug her mother's legs. Valentina had plastered on a smile, but Desmond had seen the annoyance flash across her features before she could hide it. She'd gone through the motions that night, complimenting the food she'd barely touched, laughing at Lily's stories with hollow enthusiasm, and excusing herself early to catch up on emails. When Desmond had checked their shared calendar later, he found no Westlake project meeting scheduled. In fact, the project had been marked complete 2 weeks earlier. Desmond was not a man who acted rashly. When doubt crept in, he gathered facts. The next morning, he'd called Boyd McAllister, his old college roommate who now ran a private security firm. "Just want to upgrade our home system," Desmond had said casually. "Maybe add some features I can monitor remotely." Boyd hadn't asked questions. Within 3 days, Desmond had access to footage from discreetly placed cameras throughout their home, notifications for when the security system was armed or disarmed, and GPS tracking on their family vehicles. Then he waited. It took exactly 9 days for his suspicions to be confirmed. Valentina's Range Rover, according to the tracker, spent 3 hours parked at the Lakeview Hotel on a Tuesday afternoon when she was supposedly meeting with a supplier. The same pattern repeated twice more that week. But it wasn't until he reviewed the home footage that Desmond truly understood what he was dealing with. In their own living room, while he was at a construction site and Lily at school, Valentina had entertained a visitor. The cameras had captured her laughing, that full-throated, genuine laugh he hadn't heard directed at him in months, as she entwined herself around a tall, athletic man with wavy brown hair. Pierce Kavanaugh. The architect Valentina had insisted they hire for their last 3 major projects. The man Desmond had welcomed into their professional circle, even invited to their home for dinner parties. The betrayal was complete, but Desmond didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, he began compiling evidence, documenting times, dates, locations, building his case, just as he would inspect a foundation before continuing construction. What he discovered went beyond an affair. Valentina and Pierce had been systematically steering clients toward contractors who gave them kickbacks, undermining Desmond's business relationships while presenting a united front. They'd opened a joint bank account. They'd looked at properties together in a town 60 miles away. They were planning a future, one that didn't include him. On a Thursday evening, as he sat in his home office reviewing financial statements that revealed just how deeply Valentina had been siphoning funds from her joint accounts, Desmond heard the subtle click of his office door locking. He turned to find Valentina leaning against the door frame, a tumbler of his expensive scotch in her hand. "Working late again?" she asked, her voice honeyed, but her eyes calculating. "Just catching up," he replied evenly, closing his laptop. She'd sauntered over, perching on his desk in a way that once would have distracted him completely. "You've been distant lately," she said, tracing a finger along his jaw. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," he'd answered, meeting her gaze directly. "How was your meeting with the Morgans today?" A flicker of confusion crossed her face before she recovered. "Productive. They're finally deciding on the kitchen finishes." There had been no meeting with the Morgans. They'd finalized their plans 2 weeks ago, and construction was already underway. Valentina had leaned in, her perfume, new, not the one he'd given her for her birthday, enveloping him. "You know what? Let me make you a drink. You worked too hard." Before he could respond, she'd taken his empty glass and glided to the small bar cart in the corner of his office. Her back to him, she'd prepared his usual 2 fingers of bourbon neat. When she turned back, her smile seemed almost genuine. "To us," she'd said, handing him the glass and clinking it with her own. Desmond had raised a glass to his lips, but didn't drink. Instead, he'd set it down carefully on a coaster. "I have an early meeting tomorrow," he'd said. "I should get some sleep." Disappointment, or was it frustration, had flashed across Valentina's face. "You sure? I thought we could reconnect tonight." Her hand had slid suggestively up his thigh. "Another time," he'd replied, standing up and effectively forcing her to step back. Later that night, after Valentina had fallen asleep, Desmond had collected the untouched drink from his office and sent it to a lab owned by another college friend. The results, which came back 3 days later, had confirmed what his instincts had already told him. The bourbon contained a lethal dose of his own heart medication, ground to a powder and dissolved in the amber liquid. His wife hadn't just betrayed him. She had tried to kill him. Chapter 2. Desperate Measures. Desmond had always told his foreman that when you discover dry rot in a house, you don't just patch it over. You tear out everything infected and rebuild from scratch. His marriage, he now understood, was beyond salvaging. But he wasn't about to walk away and leave his 5-year-old daughter in the custody of a woman who had attempted to murder him. For 3 weeks, he maintained the facade. He went to work, attended Lily's ballet recital, and even hosted a dinner party for potential clients with Valentina playing the role of devoted wife. All while he documented Valentina's affair, her financial misconduct, and gathered evidence of her murder attempt. He consulted with Terrence Walsh, a ruthless divorce attorney known for handling high-profile cases. Terrence had listened impassively as Desmond laid out the evidence, his only reaction a slight raising of his eyebrows at the toxicology report. "We'll need to move carefully," Terrence had advised. "If she realizes you know, there's no telling what she might do next, especially with your daughter involved." Desmond had nodded, something cold and hard crystallizing within him. "I want full custody, and I want her to have nothing. With this evidence, she'll be facing criminal charges," Terrence had replied. "But these cases can get messy. Are you prepared for what might come out?" What Terrence couldn't understand was that Desmond had already crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The man who had trusted his wife implicitly was gone, replaced by someone who would stop at nothing to protect himself and his daughter. At home, Desmond began taking precautions. He installed a small safe in his closet where he kept important documents and a gun he'd purchased after obtaining a permit. He started cooking separate meals for himself, claiming a new diet for his heart health, an excuse Valentina readily believed after years of his actual heart condition. He recorded every conversation, backed up evidence to secure servers, and never left Lily alone with Valentina for long periods. The breaking point came on a Sunday morning. Desmond had taken Lily to the park, enjoying the simple pleasure of pushing her on the swings as she squealed with delight. When they returned home, he found Valentina in Lily's bedroom, packing a small suitcase. "What are you doing?" he'd asked, keeping his voice casual despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. Valentina had startled slightly before composing herself. "Oh, Mom called. She's not feeling well. I thought Lily and I could stay with her for a few days to help out." Lily had looked confused. "But Grandma came to my school yesterday. She looked okay." Valentina's eyes had hardened momentarily before she forced a laugh. "Well, she must have gotten sick after that, sweetie. Go pick out some toys to bring, okay?" As Lily reluctantly went to gather her favorite stuffed animals, Desmond had stepped closer to Valentina. "That's odd. I just spoke to Rosa this morning when she called about next weekend's family dinner. She didn't mention feeling ill." The look Valentina gave him then, cold, calculating, almost reptilian, confirmed what he already knew. She was planning to take Lily and disappear. "Plans change," she'd said flatly. "We'll only be gone a few days." "I don't think so," Desmond had replied quietly. "Lily has school tomorrow, and I've already told her we'd finish building her science project tonight." The tension between them had been palpable, a silent battle of wills with their daughter oblivious in the next room. "Fine," Valentina had finally said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "We'll go next weekend instead. I'm sure Mom will feel better by then." That night, after Lily was asleep, Desmond had called Terrence. "We need to move now," he'd said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "File everything first thing tomorrow." But Valentina had been one step ahead of him. When he woke the next morning, both she and Lily were gone. So was Lily's passport, which he'd hidden in his home office. The Range Rover's GPS showed it parked at the airport long-term lot. Frantic, Desmond had called the police, his in-laws, and finally, Valentina herself. The call had gone straight to voicemail. Her parents claimed ignorance, their voices tinged with what seemed like genuine concern. The police had taken a report, but explained that without evidence of imminent danger, a parental kidnapping was primarily a civil matter. By noon, Desmond had been pacing his living room, his phone clutched in his hand, when it finally rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" He'd answered, his heart hammering. "Daddy." Lily's small voice had come through, trembling slightly. "Mommy says we're on vacation, but I didn't say goodbye to you or take Benny." Benny was her beloved stuffed bear, the one she couldn't sleep without. Before Desmond could respond, Valentina's voice had cut in. "Say goodbye, Lily. Daddy's very busy with work." "Where are you?" Desmond had demanded. "Put my daughter back on the phone." "Somewhere you won't find us," Valentina had replied, her voice eerily calm. "By the time you figure it out, it'll be too late. You should have just drunk the bourbon, Des. It would have been easier for everyone." The line had gone dead, leaving Desmond standing in the middle of his perfect home, the life he'd built crumbling around him. That was when he decided playing by the rules wasn't going to work. Not against someone like Valentina. If he wanted his daughter back, if he wanted justice, he would have to step outside the boundaries he'd always respected. Within hours, he'd activated a network of contacts he'd cultivated over years in the construction business. People who operated in gray areas, who could get things done without asking questions. He'd transferred funds to accounts that couldn't be traced back to him. He'd gathered passports and cash, and he'd prepared for war. Valentina had taken his daughter and tried to take his life. Now, she would learn what happened when you cornered a man with nothing left to lose. Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. When Desmond's phone began ringing incessantly at 3:17 a.m., exactly 72 hours after Valentina had disappeared with Lily, he was already awake. Sleep had become a luxury he could no longer afford. The caller ID showed Pierce Kavanaugh. By the 23rd call, Desmond finally answered. "She's lost her mind," Pierce's voice was breathless, panicked. You need to come get her. Where's my daughter? Desmond's voice was deadly calm. Listen to me. Valentina's not who you think she is. She's not who I thought she was either. Pierce sounded like he was moving, his breath coming in short bursts. She told me you were abusive, that you were threatening her. I believed her. God help me. I believed everything she said. Desmond said nothing, waiting. She has a plan, Desmond. It involves her daughter, insurance policies, offshore accounts. She played both of us. In the background, Desmond could hear what sounded like waves. Where are you? The beach house in Sandpoint. Your beach house. A bitter laugh. She's been drugging your kid, man. Keeping her sleepy so she doesn't ask questions. I try to stop her, and she... A sharp intake of breath. She came at me with a knife. I locked myself in the bathroom. Desmond was already moving, grabbing the go-bag he'd prepared. Is Lily safe right now? She's asleep in the second bedroom. Valentina's been... Pierce's voice dropped to a whisper. She's been setting everything up to make it look like you followed us here. Like you killed me in a jealous rage, and then... He couldn't finish the sentence. Keep your phone on. I'm 40 minutes away, Desmond said, already in his car. Hurry, Pierce replied. She's been mixing something in the kitchen, talking to herself. The road to Sandpoint was winding and treacherous at night, but Desmond drove with focused intensity, his mind racing faster than the car. He'd purchased the beach house 3 years ago as a surprise for Valentina, a retreat where they could escape the pressures of their growing businesses. The irony that she had chosen it as the stage for her final act wasn't lost on him. 15 minutes into the drive, his phone rang again. Pierce. She knows I called you, he whispered, terror evident in his voice. She's outside the bathroom door. She's saying, oh, God. Desmond, she's saying she's going to make it look like I took Lily and then killed myself out of guilt. Desmond pressed harder on the accelerator. Is the bathroom window large enough to climb through? Maybe, but it's a 15-foot drop to the rocks below. Better than the alternative. Get out of there and hide somewhere until I arrive. The line went dead. Desmond tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. When he finally pulled up to the isolated beach house, the scene was eerily quiet. The moon reflected off the ocean, casting long shadows across the deck. The front door stood slightly ajar. Desmond retrieved the gun from his bag, checked that it was loaded, and approached cautiously. Every instinct honed from years of navigating treacherous construction sites was on high alert. Inside, a tableau of violence greeted him. The living room was in disarray. An overturned coffee table, shattered glass, dark stains on the cream-colored rug that could only be blood. A trail of it led toward the back deck. Lily, Desmond called out, moving swiftly toward the bedrooms. Lily, it's Daddy. The second bedroom was empty, the covers thrown back, a stuffed unicorn, one he didn't recognize, lying on the floor. A sound from outside drew his attention, the creaking of wood under pressure. Desmond moved to the deck doors, gun raised. On the deck, illuminated by moonlight, stood Valentina. In one arm, she held a groggy, disoriented Lily. In her other hand, a kitchen knife pressed against their daughter's side. You should have stayed home, Valentina said, her voice unnaturally calm. This could have been so much cleaner. Let her go, Desmond said, his voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. This is between you and me. Valentina laughed, the sound brittle and wrong. It's always been about Lily, your precious daughter, the one thing you love more than your business, more than your reputation. She tightened her grip as Lily whimpered. Did you know your life insurance policy is worth $5 million? Pierce and I were going to take Lily, start fresh somewhere warm. But then he got cold feet. She glanced toward the far end of the deck where a still form lay crumpled against the railing. Weak men are such a disappointment. Daddy, Lily's small voice broke through, her eyes struggling to focus. I don't feel good. It's okay, sweetheart, Desmond said, not taking his eyes off Valentina. Everything's going to be okay. Don't make promises you can't keep, Valentina spat. She took a step backward, closer to the stairs that led down to the beach. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to put that gun down, and then you're going to swallow these. She nodded toward a small bottle on the deck table. The same heart medication you've been taking for years. Just a slightly adjusted dose. The police will find your body inside. Pierce is out here, and they'll piece together the tragic story of a man who couldn't handle his wife leaving him. And Lily? Desmond asked, his mind racing for a solution. Lily and I will be very far away, living off your generous insurance policy. She'll forget about you eventually. Desmond lowered his gun slowly, placing on the ground. And if I refuse? Valentina's grip on the knife tightened, causing Lily to cry out. Then this gets messy, eh? But the ending's the same. As Desmond straightened, his eyes caught movement behind Valentina, a shadow separating from the darkness near the beach stairs. Pierce, bloodied but alive, was silently climbing back onto the deck. You're right about one thing, Desmond said, taking a careful step forward. Weak men are a disappointment. Valentina's eyes narrowed. Don't come any closer. But you made a mistake, Val. You assumed I was one of those weak men. Another step. You thought I'd just roll over when I found out about your affair. That I'd drink that poison bourbon without question. That I wouldn't find out about the money you've been siphoning from our accounts. Confusion flickered across Valentina's face. What are you talking about? The offshore account in Belize. The one you opened 6 months ago. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? It was a bluff. He had found no evidence of such an account, but the flash of panic in Valentina's eyes told him he'd struck a nerve. In that moment of distraction, Pierce lunged forward, grabbing Valentina's knife arm and pulling it away from Lily. Desmond surged forward, ripping his daughter from Valentina's grasp and shielding her with his body as the two former lovers grappled near the deck's edge. You backstabbing coward! Valentina screamed at Pierce, slashing wildly with the knife. After everything I promised you. Pierce, already weakened from whatever injury she'd inflicted earlier, struggled to maintain his grip on her wrist. It's over, Val. No more lies. The struggle carried them dangerously close to the railing. Desmond had just enough time to turn Lily's face against his shoulder before Valentina, still fighting furiously, lost her footing on a slick patch of blood. She tumbled backward, dragging Pierce with her as her grip on his shirt tightened reflexively. Together, they crashed through the weathered railing and disappeared from view. The sickening thud that followed told Desmond all he needed to know about the rocks 15 feet below. Holding Lily tightly against him, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. My name is Desmond Reeves, he said, his voice remarkably steady. I'm at 1478 Coastal Highway. My wife has kidnapped our daughter and attempted to kill me. I need police and an ambulance immediately. As he hung up, Lily stirred against him, the effects of whatever sedative Valentina had given her beginning to wear off. Daddy, she murmured. Can we go home now? Desmond held her tighter, a cold resolution settling over him as he surveyed the chaos around them. The broken railing, the blood-spattered deck, the still forms on the rocks below. Yes, sweetheart, he said softly. We're going home. But home, he knew, would never be the same again. And neither would he. Chapter 4. Shattered Illusions. The hospital waiting room was a purgatory of uncomfortable chairs and antiseptic smells. Desmond sat rigidly, his clothes still bearing the stains of the previous night's violence, his eyes fixed on the pediatric ward doors through which they had taken Lily for examination. The rhythmic ticking of the wall clock marked each excruciating minute of separation from his daughter. Detective Meredith Solomon stood before him, her weathered face impassive as she continued her questioning. At 50-something, with salt and pepper hair, cropped short and practical, she had the air of someone who had seen every variety of human depravity and was no longer surprised by any of it. So, you're telling me your wife tried to poison you, kidnapped your daughter, and then fell to her death while attacking her lover, who also happened to be your business associate? Her tone made it clear how implausible the story sounded. That's exactly what happened, Desmond replied, his voice hoarse from repeated tellings. The toxicology report on the bourbon in my office will confirm the poison. The GPS data from our vehicles will show Valentina took Lily to the airport and then to the beach house. The security footage from our home will show her packing Lily's things without my knowledge. He rubbed his eyes. And Piers Kavanaugh's phone will contain the calls he made to me in panic when he realized what Valentina was planning. Detective Solomon made a non-committal noise. Mr. Kavanaugh is in surgery. The surgeons aren't optimistic about his chances of survival. That fall shattered most of the bones on his left side and caused significant internal bleeding. What about my wife? Desmond asked, though he already knew the answer from the grim faces of the paramedics at the scene. DOA. Neck snapped on impact with the rocks. Detective Solomon studied his face, perhaps looking for some sign of grief or shock. Finding none, she changed tack. Your daughter appears to have been sedated. Any idea what your wife might have given her? Before Desmond could answer, the pediatric ward doors swung open, and Dr. Kim approached, clipboard in hand. Her expression gave away nothing. Mr. Reeves, she began, Lily is stable. We've run a tox screen and found traces of diphenhydramine, an antihistamine, in her system. Not enough to be dangerous, but sufficient to make her groggy and compliant. She's dehydrated and confused, but otherwise physically unharmed. The relief that flooded through Desmond was so profound he nearly collapsed. Can I see her? Dr. Kim glanced at Detective Solomon, who nodded slightly. Yes, but briefly. She needs rest, and we'd like to keep her overnight for observation. As Desmond rose to follow Dr. Kim, Detective Solomon placed a restraining hand on his arm. We're not done here, Mr. Reeves. There will be many more questions in the coming days. Desmond met her gaze directly. Understand, but right now my daughter needs me. Lily lay small and vulnerable in the hospital bed, her usual vibrant energy diminished by whatever trauma and drugs remained in her system. When she saw Desmond, her face lit up despite her exhaustion. Daddy, you came. She reached out with arms encumbered by a foreline. Desmond gathered her carefully into a hug, mindful of the medical equipment. Of course I came, Lillipad. I will always come for you. Lily's lower lip trembled. Mommy was acting weird. She kept making me drink yucky juice that made me sleepy. And then she hurt Pierce and said you were a bad man. Her eyes filled with tears. But you're not bad, right, Daddy? Desmond swallowed the rage that threatened to consume him. No, sweetheart, I'm not bad. Mommy was very confused and made some bad choices. Is Mommy coming to see me? Lily asked, her innocent question landing like a physical blow. Desmond had prepared for this moment during the endless hour in the waiting room, consulting with a hospital social worker about the best approach. Mommy got hurt very badly, Lily. She died. Do you know what that means? Lily's face crumpled. Despite everything Valentina had done, she was still the only mother Lily had ever known. Like Grandpa Joe, she went to heaven and isn't coming back. That's right, Desmond said gently. Holding her, she began to sob. Over her head, he caught Dr. Kim's sympathetic gaze and the more calculating one of Detective Solomon, who had followed them into the room. The next 3 days passed in a blur of police interviews, hospital visits, and funeral arrangements. Desmond's sister Naomi arrived from Phoenix to help, taking charge of the practicalities while Desmond focused on Lily. His in-laws, Rosa and Angelo Russo, oscillated between grief for their daughter and shock at her actions, their relationship with Desmond strained by disbelief and confusion. There must be some mistake, Angelo had insisted when Desmond explained about the poisoned bourbon. Our Valentina would never. The toxicology report was conclusive, Desmond had replied flatly, as were the bank records showing she'd been planning to leave the country with Lily for months. The evidence mounted daily. Pierce Kavanaugh, who had survived surgery but remained in critical condition, had confessed everything to the police. The affair, Valentina's increasingly erratic behavior, her elaborate plot to kill Desmond and frame Pierce if he didn't cooperate. His statement, given between surgeries and pain medication, corroborated Desmond's account entirely. On the day of Valentina's funeral, a small, somber affair attended primarily by her family, Detective Solomon approached Desmond as he stood apart from the other mourners, Lily's hand clutched firmly in his. We've closed the investigation into your wife's death, she said without preamble. Accidental death during the commission of a crime. Given the evidence and Mr. Kavanaugh's statement, no charges will be filed against you. Desmond nodded, feeling nothing but a hollow exhaustion. Thank you. Detective Solomon's sharp eyes assessed him. You don't seem surprised. Should I be? I told you the truth from the beginning. Yes, you did. Very methodically. She paused, almost as if you had anticipated needing to explain everything. Desmond met her gaze steadily. When you discover your wife is having an affair and trying to poison you, detective, you tend to document things carefully. She nodded slowly. Fair enough. Take care of that little girl, Mr. Reeves. She's been through enough. As Detective Solomon walked away, Desmond felt a tug on his hand. Lily was looking up at him, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. Daddy, why don't you look sad like Nana and Nano? She asked, referring to her maternal grandparents who were openly weeping by Valentina's grave. Desmond knelt down to her level. Everyone shows sadness differently, Lillipad. I'm sad about what happened, but I'm also very grateful that you're safe with me. It wasn't a lie. He was sad. Sad for the life he thought he'd had. Sad for the mother Lily had lost. Sad for the years of deception that had led to this moment. But beneath that sadness was a hardening resolve. Valentina might be gone, but the aftermath of her betrayal was just beginning to unfold. That became painfully clear a week later when Angelo and Rosa Russo served him with papers seeking custody of Lily. Your in-laws contend that the trauma Lily experienced was a direct result of your marital problems, Terrence Walsh explained to his office, where Desmond had immediately gone after being served. They're claiming you were emotionally abusive to Valentina, driving her to desperate measures, and that Lily would be better off with them. That's absurd, Desmond said, his calm facade finally cracking. They know what Valentina did. The police investigation confirmed everything. Terrence leaned back in his chair. They're claiming the police rushed to judgment because you're a prominent businessman with political connections. They've hired Sophia Bellamy. Desmond felt his blood run cold. Sophia Bellamy was a family court attorney known for her theatrical courtroom tactics and her uncanny ability to turn public opinion against fathers in custody battles. She'd once won a case by convincing a judge that a father's extensive work travel constituted abandonment, despite his providing generously for his children. They can't possibly win, Desmond said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. They don't need to win outright, Terrence replied grimly. They just need to create enough doubt to get shared custody. And from there, they'll work to alienate Lily from you, using Valentina's memory as a weapon. The thought of losing Lily, even partially, was unbearable. What do? We fight. Hard and dirty, if necessary. Terrence pulled out a legal pad. We'll need character witnesses, child development experts, and a counter-narrative that explains Valentina's actions without making her parents look complicit. They weren't complicit, Desmond said, surprising himself with the admission. They're grieving and in denial. They loved her despite her flaws. They can't accept what she became. Terrence gave him a shrewd look. That's surprisingly compassionate, given the circumstances. Desmond thought of Lily, of how much she loved her grandparents despite the confusion of recent events. They're still Lily's family. I won't demonize them unless absolutely necessary. But as the custody battle intensified over the following weeks, it became clear that the Russos had no such compunctions. Through Sophia Bellamy, they leaked selective details to local press, painting Desmond as a controlling husband who had driven Valentina to desperation. They submitted affidavits from friends who recalled Valentina mentioning her fear of Desmond's temper. They even suggested that Piers Kavanaugh's statement had been coerced during his vulnerable state in the hospital. The campaign began to take its toll. Contractors who had worked with Desmond for years suddenly found excuses to delay projects. Invitations to community events where he had once been welcomed were quietly withdrawn. Parents at Lily's school whispered as he dropped her off, their eyes following him with suspicion. Worst of all was the effect on Lily herself. The bright, confident child had become withdrawn and anxious, prone to nightmares and sudden bouts of tears. The court-appointed therapist reported that Lily was caught in a loyalty conflict, uncertain whom to trust as the adults in her life presented conflicting narratives about her mother's death. One night, after putting a finally sleeping Lily to bed, Desmond retreated to his home office and poured himself a glass of the same bourbon that Valentina had once tried to poison. a deliberate choice that felt like reclaiming something stolen. As he sipped, he reviewed the latest motion filed by Sophia Bellamy, seeking to restrict his custody to supervised visits pending a full psychological evaluation. The injustice of it burned through him. He had been the one betrayed, the one nearly murdered, the one who had saved Lily from Valentina's increasingly unstable behavior. Yet somehow, he was now fighting to avoid being portrayed as an unfit parent. His phone rang, interrupting his dark thoughts. "Boyd McAllister. I may have found something," Boyd said without preamble when Desmond answered. "You know that background check you asked me to run on the Russos? There's a police report from 26 years ago, when Valentina was 16. It was sealed because she was a minor, but I have contacts." Desmond sat up straighter. "What kind of police report?" "Valentina was picked up for shoplifting in a mall in Chicago. When they searched her bag, they found prescription pills that didn't belong to her in a notebook with what the officer described as disturbing fantasies." "What kind of fantasies?" Boyd hesitated. "Detailed plans for getting revenge on classmates who had supposedly wronged her. Nothing came of it legally. Her parents hired a good lawyer, and she underwent mandatory counseling. The record was sealed and eventually expunged." Desmond absorbed this new information, pieces clicking into place. Her parents knew. They knew she had these tendencies, and they never said anything. "There's more," Boyd continued. "I tracked down a therapist who counseled her back then. Retired now, living in Florida. Professional ethics prevented him from sharing details, but he did say something interesting. Some patterns of behavior start early and never truly disappear. They just go underground until the pressure becomes too great." After hanging up, Desmond sat motionless, the implications washing over him. Valentina's behavior hadn't been a sudden breakdown. It had been a reemergence of something long suppressed. And her parents had known, had perhaps even enabled her by covering up previous incidents. This was the leverage he needed, not just to win the custody battle, but to ensure the Russos could never again threaten his relationship with Lily. The next morning, he called Terrence Walsh. "I need you to arrange a meeting with the Russos and Sophia Bellamy. No court, no mediators. Just us." 3 days later, they gathered in Terrence's conference room, the atmosphere frigid with hostility. Rosa Russo, once warm and maternal toward Desmond, now couldn't meet his eyes. Angelo sat rigid beside her, his hand covering hers protectively. Sophia Bellamy, sleek and predatory in a charcoal suit, regarded Desmond with thinly veiled contempt. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Desmond began, his voice calm and measured. "I wanted to discuss Lily's future face-to-face, without legal filters. If this is an attempt to pressure my clients," Sophia started, but Desmond cut her off. "It's not pressure. It's clarity." He slid a folder across the table. "This contains copies of police records from Chicago, 1999. Specifically, records pertaining to a 16-year-old Valentina Russo who was detained for shoplifting and possession of stolen prescription medication." Angelo's face drained of color. Rosa made a small, distressed sound. "Those records were sealed," Sophia said sharply. "This is intimidation and potentially illegal." Also in this folder, Desmond continued as if she hadn't spoken, are notes from Dr. Howard Kleinman detailing his assessment of Valentina's psychological state at that time, particularly his concerns about her elaborate revenge fantasies and lack of empathy toward perceived enemies. "Where did you get those?" Angelo demanded, his voice shaking. "Those are confidential medical records." Desmond met his gaze steadily. "The how isn't important. What matters is that I now understand what you've been hiding all these years. You knew Valentina had these tendencies. You knew she was capable of exactly the kind of calculated betrayal she planned for me." Rosa began to weep softly. Angelo put his arm around her shoulders, his expression a mixture of grief and shame. "You've been painting me as the villain because you can't face the truth that you raised a daughter with serious psychological issues, that you covered for her repeatedly, and that your denial nearly cost Lily her life." Sophia Bellamy started to interject, but Angelo raised a hand to silence her. "What do you want, Desmond?" he asked wearily. "I want you to drop the custody suit." I want you to publicly acknowledge that Valentina's actions were her own, not the result of anything I did. And I want your word that you will never again try to take Lily from me. And if we refuse?" Sophia asked, her voice hard. Desmond gestured to the folder. "Then these records become Exhibit A in our court case. Your client's decades-long history of enabling Valentina's behavior becomes public record. And Lily eventually learns that her grandparents knew her mother was capable of terrible things and did nothing to protect her. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of impossible choices." "You would do that to Lily?" Rosa asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let her learn such terrible things about her mother? About us?" "I would rather not," Desmond replied honestly. "She's lost enough. But I will do whatever is necessary to keep her safe and with me, where she belongs." 2 days later, the Russos withdrew their custody petition. A week after that, they issued a joint statement with Desmond expressing their mutual desire to provide Lily with a stable, loving environment as she recovered from the tragic loss of her mother, who had struggled with undiagnosed mental health issues. To the outside world, it appeared that grief had given way to reconciliation. Only Desmond knew the full truth, that he had won this battle through the same ruthless determination that had built his business, that he had forced his in-laws into submission by threatening to expose their darkest family secret, and that he would do it again, without hesitation, to anyone who threatened his daughter's well-being. As spring turned to summer, the public interest in the tragedy gradually waned. Piers Kavanaugh, after multiple surgeries and months of physical therapy, had moved out of state, his reputation in shambles. Desmond's business slowly recovered as the scandalous whispers faded into memory. And Lily, with the help of twice-weekly therapy sessions, began to reclaim some of her former sparkle. But for Desmond, the experience had fundamentally altered his perception of the world and his place in it. He had discovered a capacity for calculated ruthlessness within himself that both disturbed and empowered him. He had learned that the institutions meant to protect the innocent, the courts, the police, even family, could be manipulated against them. And he had realized that in a world where such manipulation was possible, the only true protection came from being willing to fight just as dirty as your opponents. It was a lesson he would not forget. Chapter 5. Wolves at the Door. 6 months after Valentina's death, life had settled into a new rhythm for Desmond and Lily. Their once sprawling family home now felt too large, too empty, too haunted by memories, so they had moved to a modern penthouse in the city's revitalized downtown district. From their floor-to-ceiling windows, they could watch the sunset paint the sky in spectacular colors each evening. A ritual that had become sacred to them both, a daily reminder that beauty persisted even after darkness. Lily had started first grade at an exclusive private school where security was tight and staff were discreet. She still saw a therapist weekly, but the nightmares had become less frequent, her smile more genuine. She spoke of her mother occasionally, usually in simple matter-of-fact statements. "Mommy liked this song," or "Mommy used to braid my hair like this." Desmond never contradicted these memories, allowing Lily to preserve the good parts of Valentina while protecting her from the worst truths. Professionally, Desmond had made strategic changes as well. He'd scaled back his direct involvement in construction projects, instead focusing on development and investment. Reeves Holdings now specialized in restoring historic buildings and transforming them into mixed-use properties that revitalized struggling neighborhoods. The work was profitable and garnered positive press, helping to counteract the lingering whispers about his personal tragedy. On this particular evening, Desmond sat in his home office, reviewing architectural plans for his latest project, converting an abandoned textile mill into affordable artist lofts and community spaces. Lily was at her ballet lesson, accompanied by Desmond's sister Naomi, who had relocated to be closer to them after everything that happened. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Reeves, there's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent. A Ms. Lena Moretti." Desmond frowned. The name meant nothing to him. "Did she say what this is regarding?" "She said it concerns Piers Kavanaugh. and some information you would find valuable. Desmond felt his muscles tense. Pierce had vanished from his life entirely after recovering from his injuries, moving to Colorado according to mutual acquaintances. Desmond had been content to let him disappear, having no desire to be reminded of the man who had betrayed him so completely. Send her up, he decided after a moment's hesitation, and notify security to stand by. The woman who entered his apartment minutes later was not what he expected. Lena Moretti was perhaps 35, casually elegant in tailored pants and a simple blouse, her dark hair cut in a sleek bob. She carried herself with the confident poise of someone accustomed to commanding attention in professional settings. "Mr. Reeves," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment. I apologize for the intrusion." Desmond shook her hand briefly. "You mentioned Pierce Kavanaugh. May we sit?" she asked, gesturing to the living room's seating area. When Desmond nodded, she settled onto a chair, crossing her legs in a single fluid movement. "I'm an investigative journalist with a Western Investigator. I've been working on a series about architectural fraud, specifically about firms that cut corners on materials and safety while charging premium prices." Desmond remained expressionless, but his mind was racing. "And how does this involve me or Pierce Kavanaugh?" Lena reached into her bag and removed a slim folder. 6 months ago, I was preparing to publish an exposé on Kavanaugh architecture. My investigation revealed that for at least 3 years, Pierce Kavanaugh had been falsifying material specifications on major projects, substituting substandard materials that didn't meet building codes and pocketing the difference. She opened the folder, revealing photographs of building materials and copies of invoices with highlighted discrepancies. The fraud was sophisticated and carefully concealed, but the evidence was damning. I had sources inside his firm ready to confirm everything. "Why are you telling me this?" Desmond asked, though he was beginning to see the outlines of something darker than he had imagined. "Because 2 days before my story was set to run, the tragic events at your beach house occurred. Suddenly, Pierce Kavanaugh was in the hospital, your wife was dead, and my editor pulled the story." "Too complicated," he said. "Let the dust settle." Lena's expression hardened slightly. "But I kept digging, and what I found suggests that what happened wasn't just a domestic tragedy. It was the culmination of a desperate attempt to cover up crimes that went far beyond an affair." She handed him the folder. "Pierce Kavanaugh wasn't just cheating with your wife, Mr. Reeves. He was using your company's reputation to legitimize his fraudulent practices. And when my investigation threatened to expose him, he needed a way out, preferably one that would leave him with enough money to disappear." Desmond leafed through the documents, his throat tightening as the implications became clear. "You're suggesting that Valentina and Pierce's plan wasn't just about my life insurance policy. It was about escaping legal consequences." Lena nodded. "Your wife may have had her own motivations, but Pierce was facing potential criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and the complete destruction of his career. The timing is too perfect to be coincidental." "Why come to me now?" Desmond asked, carefully controlling his voice despite the fury building inside him. "Because Pierce Kavanaugh has resurfaced. He's operating under a new name, Preston Cavallo, in Denver, with a new firm that's already securing major contracts. And he's using the same fraudulent practices." Lena leaned forward, her eyes intense. "I'm going to publish my story, Mr. Reeves. But I thought you deserve to know first, both for closure and because some of your joint projects with Kavanaugh might come under scrutiny once this breaks." The implications hit Desmond like a physical blow. Not only had Pierce betrayed him personally, but he had potentially compromised the structural integrity of buildings bearing the Reeves construction name. Buildings where people lived and worked, trusting in their safety. "I'll need to have all our joint projects independently inspected," he said, almost to himself. "Every beam, foundation, electrical system." "That would be prudent," Lena agreed. "And expensive." Desmond looked up sharply. "Are you suggesting that I might try to cover this up to avoid the cost?" Lena held his gaze steadily. "No, I'm acknowledging the practical reality you're facing. My sources tell me you're a man of integrity, despite what some local gossips might say. But integrity is expensive in situations like this. She stood to leave, retrieving a business card from her bag and placing it on the coffee table. My story runs in 2 weeks. If you discover anything in your inspections that should be included, or if you have any information about Pierce Kavanaugh that might be relevant, please call me. After she left, Desmond remained motionless, the folder open in his lap, his mind processing this new betrayal. It wasn't just his marriage, his trust, or even his life that Pierce had been willing to jeopardize. It was his professional reputation, the thing he had built through decades of painstaking work and uncompromising standards. And now, innocent people might be at risk because of structures that bore his company's name but had been compromised by Pierce's greed. The next morning, Desmond called an emergency meeting of his executive team. Without revealing the source of his information, he ordered comprehensive inspections of every project Pierce Kavanaugh had touched over the past 5 years. "I don't care what it costs," he told them. "If there are issues, we fix them immediately and quietly. If the structures are sound, we have documentation to prove it when questions arise." His COO, Mitchell Banner, looked troubled. This is going to run into millions. And if we do find problems, the liability is mine." Desmond finished for him. "My name is on those buildings. My reputation. If people have been put at risk, I'll make it right regardless of who's legally at fault." The inspections began immediately, with Desmond personally reviewing each report as it came in. The first 3 projects showed only minor issues, corner cutting that compromised aesthetic qualities but not structural integrity. Desmond authorized repairs anyway, absorbing the costs without complaint. But the 4th inspection revealed something far more serious. The central support beams in a mixed-use development had been replaced with substandard materials that testing showed could fail catastrophically within 5 to 10 years. The building housed 64 residential units, 12 small businesses, and a daycare center. The revelation hit Desmond with the force of a physical blow. Pierce hadn't just been stealing money. He had been gambling with lives, including the lives of children. That night, after putting Lily to bed, Desmond poured himself a bourbon and stepped out onto his penthouse balcony, gazing at the city lights spread before him. Somewhere out there were buildings he had helped create, structures people trusted with their lives, that might now be silently deteriorating because of Pierce Kavanaugh's greed. He thought of the daycare center in the compromised building. Children playing, napping, learning, all while untested beams slowly weakened above them. He thought of Lily, how devastated he would be if anything happened to her because someone had decided profit mattered more than safety. And he thought of Pierce, living comfortably in Denver under a new name, preparing to repeat the same deadly fraud with new victims. The bourbon burned satisfyingly as Desmond made his decision. This wasn't just about personal betrayal anymore. It wasn't even about the potential financial ruin Pierce's actions could bring to Reeves Construction if lawsuits started flying. This was about justice and prevention. Desmond retrieved Lena Moretti's card and dialed her number. "I need to meet with you again," he said when she answered. "I have information about Pierce Kavanaugh that changes everything." The next morning, in a private room at an upscale cafe, Desmond laid out what his inspections had found. Lena recorded their conversation, her expression growing increasingly grave as he detailed the extent of the structural compromise in the 4th building. "We've already started emergency reinforcement," Desmond explained. "Working nights, keeping it quiet to avoid panicking the residents. It'll be fixed before your story runs." "And the cost?" Lena asked. "Around $4 million, but that's not important. What matters is that no one was hurt." Desmond leaned forward. "But Pierce doesn't know we've discovered this. He doesn't know I'm aware of his fraud. And based on what you've told me, he's preparing to do the same thing in Denver." Lena nodded slowly. "That's my assessment as well. But proving it before people get hurt is another matter." "What if I could help you get that proof?" Desmond proposed. "What if I approach Pierce as a potential investor in his new venture? Someone with capital and construction knowledge who could help him scale his operation?" Lena's eyes widened slightly. "You'd be willing to do that? After everything he's done?" "This isn't about revenge," Desmond said, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. It's about stopping him before more lives are put at risk. What he didn't tell Lena was that he had already set events in motion. Boyd McAllister had compiled a comprehensive dossier on Pierce's new identity and business operations. A shell company had been established that couldn't be traced back to Desmond, and a meeting with Preston Cavallo had been arranged through intermediaries for the following week in Denver. What Pierce had done went beyond personal betrayal into the realm of potential mass casualty, and Desmond had decided that traditional justice, a news expose, professional sanctions, even criminal charges, wasn't enough. Pierce needed to be stripped of everything: his freedom, his reputation, his future prospects. Only then would Desmond consider the debt paid. "I'll help you get your story," he told Lena, "but I want something in return." "What's that?" she asked cautiously. "When you publish, I want you to make it clear that Reeve Construction was also a victim of this fraud, that we've taken every step to ensure the safety of our buildings at our own considerable expense, despite having no legal obligation to do so." Lena studied him for a long moment. "That's it? Just the truth about your company's response?" Desmond nodded. "The truth is all I need. It's Pierce who should fear it." As he left the cafe, Desmond felt a cold clarity settling over him. The man who had once trusted implicitly, who had welcomed Pierce Cavanaugh into his business and his home, was gone. In his place was someone more calculating, more ruthless, someone who understood that sometimes justice required stepping outside conventional boundaries. Pierce had tried to destroy everything Desmond had built. Now, Desmond would return the favor, methodically, comprehensively, and without mercy. The game was just beginning. Chapter 6: The Spider's Web. Denver's Tech Center district rose like a gleaming glass oasis from the surrounding sprawl, a testament to the city's economic boom. Desmond strode through the lobby of one of its newest high-rises, dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, his demeanor that of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. To all outward appearances, he was exactly what his cover story suggested: a successful East Coast developer looking to expand his portfolio westward. The receptionist at Cavallo Architecture and Design greeted him with practiced warmth. "Mr. Harrison? Mr. Cavallo is expecting you. Please follow me." Harrison, the identity Desmond had assumed for this meeting, complete with carefully crafted background details and a legitimate business registration in Delaware. Boyd's work had been thorough, creating a digital footprint for Thomas Harrison that would withstand casual scrutiny. The real Thomas Harrison was an elderly mathematics professor in Maine who had never ventured into real estate development and who had no idea his impeccable credit history and lack of social media presence made him an ideal identity to borrow. The office space was impressive, minimalist yet luxurious, with expansive views of the Rocky Mountains. Display models of architectural projects dotted the reception area, each accompanied by glossy renderings and glowing client testimonials. A statement wall featured awards and press clippings, the centerpiece being a Denver Business Journal cover declaring Preston Cavallo the future of sustainable urban design. It took considerable self-control for Desmond not to react when Pierce, now Preston, emerged from a conference room to greet him. The man looked different. Gone was the wavy brown hair, replaced by a closely cropped salt and pepper style. He'd grown a neatly trimmed beard and wore designer glasses that changed the contours of his face. He'd even altered his posture, standing straighter, with shoulders squared confidently. But Desmond would recognize those eyes anywhere, the same eyes that had widened in panic on the beach house deck as he realized Valentina had turned on him. "Mr. Harrison," Pierce said, extending his hand. "A pleasure to finally meet in person after our productive calls." Desmond gripped his hand firmly, allowing himself a calculated smile. "Likewise, your reputation precedes you, Mr. Cavallo." If there was any flicker of recognition in Pierce's eyes, it was swiftly suppressed. "Please call me Preston. Shall we talk in my office?" Pierce's private office was a corner space with dual exposures providing dramatic views. He gestured Desmond to a sitting area where coffee and pastries waited on a low table. "I was intrigued by your interest in our Riverfront Commons project," Pierce began, settling into a chair opposite Desmond. It's unusual for East Coast developers to venture into our market without local partners. I've found that unconventional moves often yield the best returns, Desmond replied smoothly. Your approach to mixed-use development aligns with my philosophy. Maximize profit while appearing to prioritize community benefit. Pierce's eyebrows raised slightly at the blunt assessment. An interesting way to frame it. I believe in directness between potential partners, Desmond said. The renderings and specifications you sent over are impressive, but I'm curious about how you achieve such competitive pricing while promising superior materials. A calculated pause. In my experience, those two objectives often conflict. Pierce studied him for a moment before a slow smile spread across his face. You're right, of course. Those objectives do typically conflict. He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Between us, there are always efficiencies to be found in the standard specifications. Substitutions that the average client can't discern, but that significantly impact the bottom line. Creative accounting, Desmond suggested. Creative engineering, Pierce corrected, along with strategic relationships with suppliers who understand discretion. The confirmation of his continued fraud came so easily, so arrogantly, that Desmond felt a surge of cold fury. This man had learned nothing from the destruction he'd left behind in Oakdale, the compromised buildings, the lives placed at risk. If anything, he'd grown more confident in his criminal methodology. I'd be interested in seeing how these efficiencies are implemented, Desmond said. Before committing capital, I need to understand the full process. Of course, Pierce agreed readily. How about a site visit tomorrow? We can walk through our current project, and I can show you exactly how we've optimized costs. The small recording device, disguised as a pen in Desmond's breast pocket, captured every word. The next day brought even more damning evidence. At the Riverfront Commons construction site, Pierce proudly showed Thomas Harrison how substandard materials were being substituted while paperwork was falsified to show regulatory compliance. He introduced Desmond to foremen who were complicit in the scheme and explained how building inspectors were managed through strategic consulting fees. Through it all, Desmond maintained his fascinated investor persona, asking questions that led Pierce to reveal more of his criminal enterprise, building the case against him piece by piece. The beauty of this system, Pierce explained as they stood on what would eventually be the 13th floor of a residential tower, is its scalability. With the right capital injection, say, the $10 million you're considering, we could replicate this model across 3 additional projects simultaneously. Impressive, Desmond replied, gazing out at the Denver skyline. You've thought of everything. Pierce smiled, pride evident in his expression. I learned from some mistakes in my previous firm back east. Had a partner who was too rigid about codes and standards. Cost us millions in unnecessary expenses. The casual reference to their past association, so distorted, so dismissive of the lives Pierce had endangered, nearly broke Desmond's composure. But he maintained his role, scheduling another meeting for the following week to discuss terms, and extracting an invitation to a charity gala where Pierce promised to introduce him to everyone who matters in Denver development. That evening, in his hotel suite, Desmond transferred the recordings to an encrypted drive and called Lena Moretti. I've got everything you need, he told her. Explicit admissions of fraud, details of bribery, names of accomplices. He's not just continuing the same practices, he's expanded them. This is extraordinary, Lena said after he'd summarized the evidence. But also incredibly risky. If he had recognized you, he saw what he expected to see, Desmond replied. A kindred spirit. Another predator. I'll need to verify some of this independently, Lena cautioned. But if it checks out, this isn't just an expose anymore. It's a criminal case. That's the idea, Desmond said coldly. Over the next week, Thomas Harrison continued to ingratiate himself with Pierce, attending the charity gala, touring additional properties, and reviewing fraudulent financial projections for their partnership. With each interaction, Pierce revealed more of his operation, introducing Desmond to corrupt suppliers and officials, unaware that every conversation was being meticulously documented. Meanwhile, Lena worked feverishly to corroborate the evidence, reconnecting with her original sources and developing new ones within Denver's building regulatory agencies. The story was growing beyond Pierce's fraud to encompass systemic corruption within the city's development approval process. 10 days after his initial meeting with Pierce, Desmond sat in Lena's Denver hotel room with two unexpected additions to their conspiracy: FBI Special Agent Caroline Winters and Assistant U.S. Attorney Marcus Reed. "Your evidence is compelling," Agent Winters acknowledged, reviewing the recordings, "but obtained through deception, which complicates its admissibility." The recordings were made by Ms. Moretti as part of her journalistic investigation, Desmond countered, the explanation they had agreed upon beforehand. "I merely facilitated access as a concerned citizen who recognized a danger to public safety." AUSA Reed smiled thinly. "A convenient arrangement. And your personal history with Mr. Kavanaugh, or Cavallo, as he's calling himself now, is precisely why I felt obligated to act," Desmond said smoothly. "Having unwittingly been associated with his previous fraudulent activities, I couldn't in good conscience allow him to endanger more lives." Agent Winters and AUSA Reed exchanged glances, clearly skeptical of Desmond's altruistic framing, but equally aware of the value of the evidence he'd provided. "We'll need you to sign a formal witness statement," Reed finally said, "and potentially testify if this goes to trial." "Whatever it takes to stop him," Desmond agreed readily. The plan they developed was comprehensive. Lena would publish her exposé, focusing on the regulatory failures and systemic corruption while being careful not to compromise the criminal investigation. Simultaneously, federal agents would execute search warrants at Pierce's offices and construction sites, seizing documents and digital records before they could be destroyed. Desmond's role would be to maintain his cover as Thomas Harrison, keeping Pierce distracted with investment negotiations until the moment the operation launched. 2 days later, Desmond sat across from Pierce in an upscale restaurant, ostensibly finalizing the terms of their $10 million partnership. Pierce was in an expansive mood, ordering expensive wine and speaking animatedly about their future empire. This time next year, he was saying, "We'll have broken ground on the Lake Vista project. Most exclusive address in Denver, with profit margins that will make today's numbers look like charity work. To new beginnings," Desmond said, raising his glass in a toast. Pierce clinked glasses, smiling broadly. "You know, Thomas, when you first approached me, I was cautious. My instincts are usually sharp about people, and something felt familiar about you. But I'm glad I trusted my business sense over that initial hesitation. We're going to do great things together." Desmond maintained his smile while checking his watch subtly. "I believe we are. In fact, I have a feeling things are about to get very interesting." As if on cue, his phone vibrated with a text message, the signal from Lena that her story had just gone live. 2 minutes later, Pierce's phone began ringing repeatedly. He glanced at it, frowning slightly at the unfamiliar numbers, and silenced it. "Sorry about that," he said. "Where were we?" "You were telling me about Lake Vista," Desmond prompted, counting down mentally. Before Pierce could continue, the restaurant's maitre d' approached their table, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Cavallo, there are some people asking for you at the entrance. They say it's urgent." Pierce's frown deepened. "Tell them I'm in a meeting." "They're insistent, sir. They say they're federal agents." The color drained from Pierce's face as he turned back to Desmond. "I don't understand. This must be some mistake." "No mistake, Pierce," Desmond said quietly, using his real name for the first time. "Just consequences." Recognition dawned in Pierce's eyes, followed quickly by horror. "Desmond? But how? Why?" "You put people's lives at risk for profit," Desmond said, his voice still calm, but now stripped of its false warmth. "Not just strangers in buildings with compromised support beams, but my daughter, my family. Did you think I would just let that go?" Pierce's expression morphed from shock to calculation. "Whatever they think they have on me, it won't stick. I've been careful, not careful enough." Desmond stood as 2 FBI agents approached the table. "Enjoy prison, Pierce. I hear it's not kind to men who endanger children." As the agents escorted a shell-shocked Pierce from the restaurant, Desmond felt not the satisfaction he had anticipated, but a cold, hollow certainty. One debt had been repaid. One betrayer had faced justice. But it didn't erase what had happened, didn't heal the wound at the core of his life. Outside the restaurant, Lena waited by taxi. "It's done," she said simply. "The story's already trending nationally. His empire is collapsing as we speak." Desmond nodded, watching as Pierce was placed in an unmarked car down the street. What happens now? Now, the story continues to unfold. Investigations expand. Other corrupt officials and contractors get swept up in the net. She studied his face. "But that's not what you're asking, is it?" "No," Desmond admitted. "I'm asking what happens to me now. When does this feeling end?" Lena's expression softened with unexpected empathy. "I don't know if it does. But you've done something important here, not just for yourself, but for public safety. Whatever your personal motivations, the outcome is justice." Justice. The word felt both right and insufficient. Pierce would face charges that could put him away for decades. His fraud had been exposed, his new identity ruined, his future destroyed. By any reasonable measure, Desmond had won. Yet, as he boarded his flight back to Oakdale the next morning, he found himself thinking not of Pierce, but of Valentina, of how her betrayal had been even more fundamental, more damaging. Pierce had been a business associate who became an enemy, but Valentina had been his wife, the mother of his child, the person he had trusted most in the world. And while circumstances had delivered a kind of justice in her case, Desmond had never had the satisfaction of confronting her as he had Pierce, of seeing recognition and regret in her eyes in that final moment of reckoning. Some debts, it seemed, could never be fully repaid. As the plane lifted off, carrying him back to Lily and the life they were rebuilding, Desmond made a silent promise to himself. He would not allow the past to poison their future. He would focus on protecting Lily, on nurturing her resilience and joy, on building something stronger from the ashes of what had been destroyed. But he would also remain vigilant, because if his experiences had taught him anything, it was that trust must be earned and then continuously verified. That beneath the surface of even the most perfect-seeming lives, dangerous currents could be flowing, and that when those currents threatened what he loved, he would stop at nothing to divert them. Chapter 7. Ghosts and Shadows. 18 months after Valentina's death, on Lily's 7th birthday, Desmond hosted a small party at their penthouse. Despite his offers of elaborate celebrations, renting out the children's museum or the botanical gardens, Lily had insisted on something simple. Just her best friends from school, her grandparents, her Aunt Naomi, and, of course, her father. "I want it to be just us," she'd explained with a gravity beyond her years. "The people who really love me." So Desmond had arranged everything according to her specifications. Decorations in purple and silver, her current favorite colors. A unicorn-themed cake that he'd learned to make himself after weeks of secret baking lessons, and gift bags containing crystal-growing kits for each of her 5 friends. As he watched Lily blow out her candles, her face illuminated by the flickering light, he felt a rush of fierce pride and protective love. She had survived unspeakable trauma and emerged not unscathed but undefeated. Her therapist had recently described her as remarkably resilient, noting that while she still had occasional nightmares and moments of anxiety, she was thriving academically and socially. A quiet presence beside him drew Desmond's attention. Rosa Russo, watching her granddaughter with tear-filled eyes. "She looks so much like Valentina at that age," Rosa said softly. The same joy, the same intensity. Desmond tensed slightly, but kept his voice neutral. "She has your eyes, though. That same warm brown." Their relationship had evolved into something complex in the months since the custody battle. After the initial confrontation in Terrence Walsh's office, the Russos had retreated, chastened and grief-stricken. But over time, as the acute pain of Valentina's death subsided into chronic sorrow, they had cautiously rebuilt connections with Desmond and Lily. For Lily's sake, Desmond had allowed it, setting clear boundaries but recognizing his daughter's need for her extended family. The Russos now saw Lily twice monthly for supervised visits, gradually earning back limited trust through consistent, appropriate behavior. "You've done well with her," Rosa continued, her voice heavy with the weight of unspoken guilt. Better than we ever could have. Before Desmond could respond, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Normally, he would ignore calls during Lily's special day, but the screen showed Boyd McAllister's name, and Boyd knew never to call unless it was truly urgent. "Excuse me," he said to Rosa, stepping away toward his office. "I need to take this." Once behind closed doors, he answered. "What is it?" "We have a problem," Boyd said without preamble. "A big one." Pierce Kavanaugh's preliminary hearing was this morning. Desmond frowned. Pierce had been denied bail after his arrest, deemed a flight risk due to his previous identity change and the severity of the charges against him. The case against him was proceeding, with Desmond expected to testify once it went to trial. "What happened?" he asked, a sense of foreboding growing. "He's claiming that everything, the fraud, the affair with Valentina, even the events at the beach house, was orchestrated by you as part of an elaborate scheme to eliminate competitors and take control of lucrative development contracts." Desmond felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "That's absurd. The evidence is being challenged on multiple fronts." Boyd cut in. "His new attorney is arguing that the recordings were obtained illegally, that key witnesses were coerced, and that the entire investigation was tainted by your vendetta against him. The FBI conducted their own investigation after I brought them the initial evidence," Desmond pointed out. "They found corroborating documentation." "Yes, but Pierce is claiming that documentation was planted. He's spinning a complex conspiracy theory, and his attorney is very good at making it sound plausible." Boyd paused. "There's more. He's claiming that Valentina discovered your scheme and threatened to expose you, which is why you arranged for her death at the beach house." The accusation was so outrageous that Desmond nearly laughed. "I was investigated thoroughly after what happened at the beach house. I was cleared completely. I know that, but Pierce is claiming the local investigation was superficial because of your connections. He's demanding that the feds re-examine everything as part of his defense strategy." Desmond's mind raced. This is just a desperate attempt to shift blame. No one will take it seriously. "Maybe not ultimately," Boyd conceded, "but it's already gaining traction in certain circles." The Denver Post ran a front-page story this morning with the headline, "Construction Fraud Case Takes Dark Turn. Murder Allegations Surface." Desmond closed his eyes briefly, thinking of Lily celebrating in the next room, blissfully unaware that her birthday might be marred by a fresh wave of public scrutiny and whispered accusations. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice hardening. "I've already contacted Terrence Walsh. He's preparing legal responses, and my team is doing damage control with local media, emphasizing your cooperation with authorities and the mountain of evidence against Pierce." Boyd hesitated. "But there's something else you should know." Pierce specifically mentioned Lena Moretti in his accusations, claiming she was part of your conspiracy. That was concerning. Lena had been scrupulously ethical in her reporting, careful to verify every claim independently even after Desmond provided his evidence. If Pierce succeeded in casting doubt on her journalistic integrity, it could damage her career irrevocably. "I'll call her," Desmond decided. "She needs to be prepared." "There's one more thing," Boyd said. "Pierce's attorney has submitted a witness list for the eventual trial. Angelo Russo is on it." Desmond felt as if he'd been struck. "Valentina's father? Why?" "Unknown. But given the timing and context, it can't be good." After ending the call, Desmond stood motionless in his office, trying to process this new threat. From the living room came the sound of children's laughter and the muffled music of a party game. For a moment, he was tempted to barricade himself and Lily away, to protect her from this newest assault on their fragile peace. But he had learned that retreating only gave power to those who sought to harm them. Better to face this head-on, to counter Pierce's desperate accusations with truth and evidence. He returned to the party, maintaining a calm facade for Lily's sake while his mind worked through contingency plans. When the children had been collected by their parents and only family remained, he drew Angelo aside. "We need to talk," he said quietly, privately. In his office, with the door closed, Desmond faced his former father-in-law directly. "Pierce Kavanaugh's attorney has listed you as a witness in his trial. Care to explain why?" Angelo's weathered face registered surprise, then dismay. "This is the first I'm hearing of it." I haven't spoken to Pierce since before. He trailed off, unable to directly reference his daughter's death, even after so many months. His attorney wouldn't list you without reason, Desmond pressed. What could you possibly testify about that would help his case? Nothing, Angelo insisted, his Italian accent thickening with emotion. I knew the man only through you and Valentina. I have no knowledge of his business practices. Desmond studied the older man's face, searching for signs of deception. Pierce is claiming that I orchestrated everything. The fraud, the affair, even Valentina's death, as part of some elaborate scheme. He's trying to rewrite history to save himself. Angelo's expression hardened. That's insane. We all know what Valentina did, what she became. His voice broke slightly. Rosa and I have spent months in therapy trying to understand how we missed the signs, how our beautiful daughter could have. He shook his head. I would never support such lies. Then why would his attorney list you as a witness? Desmond persisted. I don't know, Angelo admitted. Perhaps to create confusion? To suggest there are family secrets that would support his version of events? The possibility hung between them, uncomfortable but plausible. Legal strategies often involved misdirection and implied threats that never materialized in actual testimony. If they contact you, Desmond said, tell them nothing. Refer them to Terrence Walsh. Angelo nodded, then hesitated. Desmond, I know our relationship has been complicated since everything happened, but I want you to know that Rosa and I would never do anything to harm Lily or to dishonor the truth of what happened, no matter how painful that truth is. The sincerity in the older man's eyes was convincing, but Desmond had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. He would verify Angelo's claims, just as he now verified everything and everyone in his life. Over the next week, the situation evolved rapidly. Pierce's allegations made national news, with commentators debating the plausibility of his claims versus the documented evidence against him. Lena Moretti published a detailed rebuttal in the Western Investigator, dismantling each of Pierce's accusations while revealing additional evidence of his fraudulent practices that had emerged since his arrest. Desmond maintained a dignified silence, publicly while working feverishly behind the scenes. Boyd's team monitored all communications to and from the Russos, confirming that they had not, in fact, been in contact with Pierce or his legal team. Terrence Walsh filed motions to have Angelo removed from the witness list on grounds of irrelevance. And Desmond himself prepared a comprehensive timeline of events supported by bank records, phone logs, security footage, and witness statements that conclusively disprove Pierce's wild conspiracy theories. But the damage to his public reputation was already spreading. Clients began delaying decisions on new projects. Invitations to speak at industry events were quietly rescinded. Parents at Lily's school once again eyed him warily during drop-off, whispering behind their hands as he walked past. It was Pierce's final revenge, not a killing blow, perhaps, but a poisoned scratch that threatened to fester if not treated aggressively. 10 days after Pierce's accusations became public, Desmond received an unexpected visitor at his office. The receptionist announced, "There's a Dr. Simone Vasquez here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but says it's regarding Pierce Kavanaugh." Desmond hesitated, then instructed, "Send her in, but alert security to stand by." Dr. Vasquez was a slender woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a neat bun. She carried herself with the poised confidence of someone accustomed to being the authority in the room. "Mr. Reeves," she said, extending her hand, "thank you for seeing me without an appointment. I apologize for the intrusion, but after watching recent events unfold, I felt compelled to come forward." "And you are?" Desmond asked, shaking her hand briefly. "Dr. Simone Vasquez. I'm a psychiatrist specializing in personality disorders. Until 6 months ago, I was treating Pierce Kavanaugh, or Preston Cavallo, as he called himself in Denver." Desmond's interest sharpened immediately. "Please sit down. How did you find me?" "Your name has been in the news quite prominently," she said with a slight smile, settling into a chair. "And contrary to what Mr. Kavanaugh is now claiming, he spoke of you often in our sessions. Never positively, I'm afraid. I can imagine," Desmond said drily. "But I'm confused about why you're here. Surely doctor-patient confidentiality prevents you from discussing his case." Dr. Vasquez nodded. "Ordinarily, yes. However, there are specific circumstances under which that confidentiality can be breached, particularly when there's a threat to public safety or when the patient has involved the therapist in his criminal activities, even unwittingly." She removed a thin folder from her bag. "Pierce came to me claiming to suffer from PTSD following a tragic accident that killed his friend's wife. He described you as an abusive, controlling figure who had driven your wife to desperate measures and then manipulated the narrative to cast yourself as the victim." "None of that is true," Desmond said, keeping his voice even. "I know that now," Dr. Vasquez replied. "But at the time, I had only his version of events. It was only when I saw the news about his arrest and the subsequent allegations that I began to research more thoroughly." She met Desmond's gaze directly. "What I found disturbed me deeply. I realized that not only had Pierce lied to me consistently, but he had used our sessions to craft a narrative that he is now deploying in his legal defense, a narrative I helped him refine, believing I was treating legitimate trauma." "What exactly are you saying?" Desmond asked, though he was beginning to see where this was heading. "I'm saying that Pierce isn't just lying now out of desperation. He has been constructing this alternate version of events for at least 6 months, testing it with me, refining it based on my feedback, and preparing to deploy it if he was ever caught." Dr. Vasquez's expression hardened. "He used me as a tool to develop a convincing web of lies, which constitutes fraud and invalidates our doctor-patient relationship." She placed the folder on Desmond's desk. "These are my session notes with identifying details redacted. They document the evolution of Pierce's false narrative and, more importantly, the inconsistencies that emerged when he didn't realize the significance of what he was revealing." "Why bring this to me instead of the authorities?" Desmond asked, not touching the folder. "I've already spoken with the FBI agents handling his case," Dr. Vasquez assured him. "But I felt you deserved to know directly, given the damage his accusations are causing to your reputation." She hesitated, and, frankly, I wanted to apologize for my unwitting role in this. As a mental health professional, I find it deeply disturbing that my practice was exploited to perfect a deception meant to harm innocent people. Desmond studied her, looking for signs of ulterior motives, but finding only professional dismay and what appeared to be genuine regret. "This could damage your career," he noted, "coming forward like this." "Perhaps," she acknowledged, "but I've always believed that integrity matters more than professional comfort." Pierce Kavanaugh is attempting to use the mental health system as a shield for his crimes. As someone dedicated to helping people heal legitimate trauma, I cannot allow that to stand unchallenged. After Dr. Vasquez left, Desmond reviewed her notes carefully. They revealed not just Pierce's calculated approach to creating his false narrative, but specific details about his relationship with Valentina that could only have been known by someone genuinely involved with her. Pierce had accidentally corroborated key elements of the true timeline while thinking he was building his defense. Desmond immediately forwarded copies to Terrence Walsh and to the prosecutor handling Pierce's case. This was the break they needed. Evidence that Pierce's conspiracy claims were not desperate last-minute fabrications, but calculated deceptions he had been developing for months. The impact was immediate and decisive. 3 days later, the prosecutor announced that Pierce Kavanaugh had agreed to a plea deal, admitting to all fraud charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. His accusations against Desmond were formally withdrawn, with his attorney issuing a terse statement acknowledging they had been tactical legal maneuvers not supported by evidence. The media cycle moved on to newer scandals, leaving Desmond's reputation wounded but intact. Clients who had been hesitating began returning cautiously. The whispers at Lily's school subsided, and Pierce Kavanaugh disappeared into the federal prison system to serve a 12-year sentence, his name now synonymous with fraud rather than architectural innovation. It should have felt like victory. The final loose end from Valentina's betrayal had been tied up. Justice had been served. Desmond and Lily could truly move forward now, free from the shadows of the past. Yet as Desmond sat in his office late one evening, watching the city lights spread before him like a carpet of stars, he felt a persistent emptiness. The rage that had fueled him through the beach house confrontation, the custody battle, and Pierce's prosecution had burned itself out, leaving behind what? He had protected Lily. He had salvaged his business. He had ensured that both Valentina and Pierce faced consequences for their actions, albeit in very different ways. By any objective measure, he had won. But winning, he was discovering, wasn't the same as healing. Justice wasn't the same as peace. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Naomi. Hey, he answered, realizing he'd forgotten their planned call to discuss Lily's upcoming school break. You sound tired, his sister observed immediately. Another rough day? Just thinking, he admitted. The Pierce situation is resolved. We're finally clear of all that. That's good news, Naomi said, her voice warming. You and Lily deserve some peace. That's just it, Desmond found himself saying. I don't know if peace is possible. Even with Valentina gone and Pierce in prison, I keep waiting for the next threat, the next betrayal. I become someone who expects the worst from everyone. Naomi was silent for a moment. That's understandable, given what you've been through. But Desmond, not everyone is Valentina or Pierce. Some people can be trusted. Can they? He asked softly. I trusted them both implicitly. I never saw it coming, any of it. How can I ever trust my judgment again? Because your judgment also told you to fight for Lily, Naomi reminded him gently. To rebuild your life. To find justice rather than just revenge. Those were all the right calls. Desmond considered this. It was true that not all his instincts had failed him. When it mattered most, when Lily's safety was at stake, he had made the right decisions consistently. Maybe, he conceded, but I'm not the same person I was. No, you're not, Naomi agreed. You're stronger in some ways, more cautious in others. But the core of who you are, the brother who helped me through my divorce, the father who reads Lily 3 bedtime stories every night, the man who insists on paying his subcontractors fair wages even when clients try to cut corners, that hasn't changed. Her words resonated more than he expected, touching something fundamental that had been buried beneath layers of pain and righteous anger. I miss who I was, he admitted, the words feeling raw and vulnerable. I miss being able to walk into a room without assessing everyone for potential threats. I miss believing in happy endings. Then maybe that's your next project, Naomi suggested. Not rebuilding your business or your reputation, but rebuilding your capacity to hope. For Lily's sake, if not your own. After they hung up, Desmond remained in his darkened office, Naomi's words echoing in his mind. Could he find his way back to some version of the man he had been before Valentina's betrayal? Not naive or blindly trusting, but fundamentally optimistic about human nature? He wasn't sure. But as he thought of Lily, her resilience, her gradually returning joy, her ability to still see wonder in the world despite everything she had endured, he knew he had to try. For both their sakes. Chapter 8. The Truth in Ashes. 2 years and 3 months after Valentina's death, on an unseasonably warm spring day, Desmond received a call from Rosa Russo. Her voice, normally composed, even in difficult conversations, trembled slightly. Desmond, Angelo has had a heart attack. It's very serious. The doctors aren't optimistic. Despite the complicated history between them, Desmond felt a genuine pang of concern. Angelo had been a constant, if sometimes strained, presence in Lily's life since the custody battle resolution. They had developed a cordial relationship built on mutual love for Lily and a shared determination to protect her from further trauma. I'm so sorry, Rosa. Is there anything I can do? He's asking to see you, Rosa said, her voice breaking. Alone. He says there are things he needs to tell you before. She couldn't finish the sentence. Desmond frowned. Things about what? He wouldn't say, just that it was important. For Lily's sake. Rosa sounded exhausted, grief weighing down each word. I know it's a lot to ask, with everything that's happened, but please, he's my husband of 45 years, and I've never seen him so adamant about anything. Of course I'll come, Desmond assured her, already mentally rearranging his schedule. Which hospital? 2 hours later, Desmond stood outside the cardiac intensive care unit at Mercy General, steeling himself before entering Angelo's room. What could the older man possibly need to tell him that was so urgent, so important that it couldn't wait even in the face of death? Angelo lay pale and diminished against the white hospital sheets, an oxygen cannula in his nose, and various monitors tracking his faltering vital signs. His eyes were closed, but they fluttered open at the sound of Desmond's footsteps. "You came," he said weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," Desmond replied, taking the chair beside the bed. "Rosa said you needed to speak with me." Angelo nodded slightly, grimacing with the effort. "The doctors say I don't have long. Hours, maybe, and I can't take this to my grave." He struggled to reach for a cup of water on the bedside table. Desmond helped him, holding the straw to his lips. After taking a small sip, Angelo continued, "I've been trying to make peace with God for what happened, for my part in it." A cold feeling settled in Desmond's stomach. "Your part in what, exactly?" Angelo met his eyes directly, shame evident in his gaze. "I knew Valentina was troubled long before you did. I knew, and I said nothing when you married her, when you had a child with her." His voice broke. "I told myself she had changed, that her episodes were in the past." "Episodes?" Desmond echoed, trying to keep his voice neutral despite the rising tension within him. "The first time was when she was 15, Angelo said, his words coming more rapidly now, as if he feared running out of time. "A teacher who gave her a poor grade suddenly became ill. Strange symptoms that couldn't be explained. They found rat poison in his coffee thermos. Valentina had access to his classroom during lunch break." Desmond felt the room tilt slightly. "What happened?" "Nothing could be proven. We moved to a different school district. Got her therapy." Angelo's breathing became more labored. "Then at 17, a boyfriend who broke up with her had a severe allergic reaction at a party. Someone had put peanut oil in his drink, knowing his allergy. Again, no proof, but Rosa and we knew. You knew she was capable of murder, and you said nothing to me?" Desmond asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "We thought she was better," Angelo insisted weakly. "The therapy, the medication. For years, she seemed stable, happy. When she met you, we truly believed she had overcome her darkness." Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. "We want to believe it so badly that we ignored the signs when they returned." "What signs?" Desmond demanded. "Small things at first. Extreme reactions to perceived slights. Secretiveness. Then we noticed her personality would seem to shift, especially around you." Angelo closed his eyes briefly. "Rosa found her journal about 6 months before the beach house. It contained disturbing fantasies about harming you, about taking Lily away. Rosa confronted her, and Valentina promised to increase her therapy sessions. But you still said nothing to me," Desmond said, struggling to control his mounting anger. "You left me in danger. You left my daughter in danger." "It was my greatest failure," Angelo admitted, his voice breaking. "A father's blind spot for his child. I couldn't bear to see her institutionalized, to admit that our beautiful daughter was capable of such darkness." He reached feebly for Desmond's hand. "I have asked God for forgiveness. Now I'm asking you." Desmond didn't take the offered hand. The revelation that Angelo and Rosa had known, had suspected what Valentina was capable of and remained silent, rekindled the cold rage he thought he had finally put behind him. "Where is this journal now?" he asked, his voice flat. "Rosa burned it after Valentina died. She couldn't bear for anyone to see those thoughts, to remember Valentina that way." Angelo's breathing became more labored. "But there's something else you need to know. Something I only discovered recently." Desmond waited, his jaw clenched. "When we were clearing out some of Valentina's old belongings from our attic, I found a box I'd never seen before. It contained items from her previous targets, souvenirs." Angelo's voice dropped to a whisper, shame evident in every syllable. "And there are medical records, psychiatric evaluations from when she was a teenager. One diagnosis appeared repeatedly: antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic features. The clinical term hung in the air, giving name to the monster that had shared Desmond's bed, raised his child, and plotted his murder. The doctors warned us, Angelo continued, each word clearly costing him precious energy. They said she would always be a risk to others, that she could not form genuine attachments, only simulations of them, that her calm periods were merely times when she felt in control. His eyes sought Desmond's, pleading for understanding. We couldn't accept it. She was our only child, our beautiful girl. We convinced ourselves that love would be enough, that she could overcome her nature with enough support. Desmond stood abruptly, unable to remain still with the fury coursing through him. Where is this box now? In a storage unit, Angelo replied weakly, fumbling with a hospital wristband. Written on the inside in shaky handwriting were an address and access code. I kept it as penance, a reminder of my failure. His voice faltered. Lily should never know. Promise me she'll never know what her mother truly was. Desmond took the wristband, slipping it into his pocket without commenting on the request. Is there anything else I should know? Any other secrets you've kept that might endanger my daughter? Angelo shook his head slightly, tears now flowing freely. That's everything. I'm so sorry, Desmond. If I could go back. But you can't. Desmond cut him off, his voice cold. None of us can. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Despite his anger, he recognized the courage it had taken for Angelo to confess, to face his failures in his final hours. I'll tell Rosie you're asking for her, he said, not quite forgiveness, but not total rejection either. Angelo nodded weakly, gratitude in his eyes. Take care of Lily. She deserves so much better than the legacy we gave her. On that, at least they could agree. That evening, after ensuring Lily was settled with Naomi for a special aunt sleepover, Desmond drove to the storage facility Angelo had identified. The small unit was in a nondescript building on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where people stored Christmas decorations and outgrown baby clothes. Not secrets that could destroy lives. The box was exactly where Angelo had said it would be. A simple cardboard file box with Val's school projects written on the side in faded marker. An innocuous label for the darkness within. Desmond brought it back to his penthouse, setting it on his dining table and staring at it for long minutes before finally lifting the lid. The contents were meticulously organized, each item in its own folder or envelope, labeled with dates and names. Medical records documented Valentina's psychiatric history from age 14 onward. Evaluations, treatment plans, prescriptions for various antipsychotics, and mood stabilizers. Notes from therapists detailed her concerning lack of empathy and highly developed ability to mimic appropriate emotional responses. One psychiatrist had written with disturbing prescience. Patient demonstrates remarkable charm and persuasiveness. She can present as completely normal and even exceptionally empathetic when it serves her purposes. This makes her particularly dangerous, as those close to her will likely dismiss warning signs as anomalies rather than glimpses of her true nature. Beneath the medical documents were the souvenirs Angelo had mentioned. A teacher's monogrammed pen, a class ring from a former boyfriend, a lock of hair from a childhood friend who had mysteriously fallen ill after a sleepover. Small, seemingly innocuous items that took on sinister significance in this context. And then Desmond found something unexpected. A small leather journal with his own name embossed on the cover. He didn't recognize it. It wasn't something he had given Valentina. Opening it with unsteady hands, he found page after page of detailed observations about him. His habits, his preferences, his weaknesses. The early entries were almost loving, noting things like his favorite foods or how he looked when concentrating on work. But about 2 years into their marriage, the tone changed dramatically. Entries became calculating, critical, even hateful. Valentina had documented perceived slights, moments when he had failed to prioritize her needs, instances when he had paid more attention to work or to Lily than to her. The final pages contained what could only be described as murder plans, different scenarios for eliminating him, each evaluated for effectiveness and likelihood of detection. The poison bourbon had been only one of several options she had considered. Others had included tampering with his car's brakes or staging a break-in gone wrong. Most chilling of all was a list titled after Dee's death, which included detailed plans for using his life insurance money, selling his company assets, and eventually relocating with Lily to start fresh in another country. Piers Kavanaugh appeared in these plans initially, but in later entries, he was described as becoming a liability and may need to be eliminated as well. The evidence was irrefutable. Valentina had never loved him, had likely never been capable of genuine love for anyone. Their entire relationship had been a performance, a long con orchestrated by someone whose emotional landscape was fundamentally alien to normal human experience. And her parents had suspected, had known on some level, what she was. Yet they had remained silent, allowing him to marry her, to father a child with her, to build a life on what amounted to quicksand. Desmond sat motionless at his dining table until dawn, absorbing the full horror of what he had discovered. By the time the first light of morning touched the eastern sky, he had reached several conclusions. First, Lily must indeed never know the full truth about her mother. The sanitized version she currently believed, that Valentina had been troubled, had made terrible mistakes, but had loved her in her way, was painful enough. Learning that her mother had been a calculating sociopath incapable of genuine love would devastate her. Second, the Russos' role in his life and Lily's would need to be reevaluated. Angelo was likely already gone. Rosa would be deep in grief. But once the immediate crisis passed, boundaries would need to be established based on this new understanding of their complicity. Third, and perhaps most important, Desmond himself needed to find a way forward that didn't allow Valentina's posthumous revelations to poison his future or Lily's. The rage he felt was justified, but ultimately destructive if he continued to nurture it. As the sun rose fully, Desmond made a decision. He gathered the contents of the box and took them to his balcony. There, in a small metal fire pit they sometimes use for esmores on cool evenings, he burned every document, souvenir, piece of physical evidence of Valentina's true nature. He watched as the psychiatric reports curled and blackened, as the journal containing plans for his murder disintegrated into ash, as the souvenirs of her previous victims melted or charred beyond recognition. When nothing remained but ashes, Desmond gathered them into a small metal container. Later, when he was alone with his thoughts, he would scatter them into the ocean, not as a memorial, but as a final severing of Valentina's power to harm him or Lily. The physical evidence was gone, but the knowledge remained. Knowledge that would shape his decisions moving forward, that would inform his vigilance and his caution, but that would not, he promised himself, prevent him from eventually finding some measure of peace. That evening, he received word that Angelo Russo had passed away peacefully, with Rosa at his side. Desmond felt a complex mixture of emotions, anger still simmering beneath a layer of reluctant pity. The man had failed catastrophically in his responsibility to protect others from his daughter, but he had also lived with that knowledge, that guilt, for decades. Perhaps that had been punishment enough. For Rosa, who would soon be planning her husband's funeral, Desmond felt a more complicated empathy. She had lost both her husband and her daughter, had seen her family's darkest secrets exposed, had been forced to confront her own complicity in enabling Valentina's behavior. Yet she remained Lily's grandmother, a connection to her past that couldn't simply be severed without causing further harm. As Desmond tucked Lily into bed that night, after breaking the news about her grandfather's death as gently as possible, she looked up at him with eyes that seemed older than her 7 years. "Daddy," she said softly, "are you sad about Nano?" Desmond chose his words carefully. "I'm sad that you're sad, Lillipad, and I'm sad that Nana is going to be very lonely now." Lily nodded, processing this. "Is it okay if I still love Mommy and Nano, even though they did bad things?" The question caught Desmond off guard, piercing straight to the heart of what he had been wrestling with all day. "Of course it is," he said, stroking her hair. "Love is complicated. Sometimes we love people even when they make terrible mistakes. But you'll never make those kinds of mistakes, right? You'll always be here to protect me." "Always," Desmond promised, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "No matter what." As Lily drifted to sleep, Desmond realized that the path forward was clearer than he had thought. His role wasn't to erase Valentina from Lily's life or to demonize the Russos. It was to provide stability, to be the parent who never failed her, and to help her develop the strength and judgment that would allow her to understand her complex inheritance when she was old enough. And for himself, the path was equally clear, if more difficult. He would continue to protect what was his daughter, his business, his reconstructed life, with the same ruthless determination he had shown in confronting Valentina and Pierce. But he would not allow their betrayal to define him entirely. He would find his way back to some version of the man he had been before, not naive, but not consumed by distrust either. It wouldn't be easy, but as he had proven time and again over the past 2 years, Desmond Reeves did not shy away from difficult tasks, especially when the stakes were as high as his daughter's future and his own soul. Chapter 9. Ashes to Empire. 3 years to the day after Valentina's death, Desmond stood at the edge of a construction site, watching as workers poured the foundation for what would become the Lily Rose Center, a state-of-the-art facility for children who had experienced trauma. The project represented everything he had been working toward in the years since his life had imploded, a way to transform personal tragedy into something meaningful, to create something enduring from the ashes of destruction. The morning sun gleamed off his hard hat as Mitchell Banner approached, tablet in hand. Final inspection reports just came in. Everything's perfect, as usual. Desmond nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Reeves Holdings had not just recovered from the scandals surrounding Valentina and Pierce. It had thrived, expanding into new markets and earning a reputation for both design excellence and uncompromising integrity. The company now specialized in projects that serve community needs while generating healthy profits, a balance that had once seemed impossible in the cutthroat development world. And the Bailey contract? Desmond asked, referring to their latest acquisition, a struggling construction firm with prime government contracts that had been mismanaged to the brink of bankruptcy. Signed yesterday, Mitchell confirmed. We got it for 30 cents on the dollar, just like you predicted. Previous owners never saw us coming. Desmond allowed himself a small smile. The Bailey acquisition had been meticulously planned over 18 months, a complex maneuver involving strategic hires from their management team, carefully timed market moves to depress their stock value, and finally, a rescue offer that appeared generous but actually represented a fraction of the company's true worth. It was the kind of ruthless business strategy that had become Desmond's signature, calculated, patient, and devastatingly effective. The business world had learned what Valentina and Pierce had discovered too late, that beneath Desmond Reeves' composed exterior lay a mind capable of implacable determination when his interests were threatened. Have HR prepare the standard transition package for their employees, Desmond instructed, but flag anyone associated with the previous management for review. His tone left no doubt about what that review would entail, a thorough investigation into their competence, integrity, and loyalty before deciding whether they had a future with Reeves Holdings. As they walked back toward the trailer that served as the site office, Desmond spotted a familiar car pulling into the gravel parking area. Rosa Russo, elegant even in widowhood, emerged with a small girl who immediately broke into a run when she spotted Desmond. "Daddy," Lily called, now a vibrant 8-year-old whose resemblance to Valentina had faded as her own personality emerged more strongly. "We came to see the big trucks." Desmond scooped her up, swinging her in a circle that made her shriek with delight. "Well, you're in luck, Lillipad. We're pouring concrete today. Want to see?" As Lily nodded enthusiastically, Desmond caught Rose's eye over his daughter's head. Their relationship had evolved into something neither could have imagined in the aftermath of Valentina's death and Angelo's deathbed confession. Not friendship, exactly, but a carefully negotiated alliance rooted in their shared love for Lily. Rosa had grieved her husband, sold their too-large house, and moved into a modest condo closer to Desmond and Lily. She had undergone intensive therapy, confronting her role in enabling Valentina's behavior, and had emerged with a hard-won wisdom that Desmond grudgingly respected. She insisted on surprising you, Rosa explained as she approached. We were driving past, and she recognized the Reeves construction signs. It's a welcome surprise, Desmond assured her, setting Lily down and retrieving a child-sized hard hat from the site office. Perfect timing, too. We're about to pour the foundation for the building that will have your name on it. Lily beamed with pride as she donned the hard hat. Can I push the button to make the cement come out? Concrete, Desmond corrected gently. And yes, I think that can be arranged. As they walked toward the massive concrete pumps, Lily between them holding both their hands, Rosa spoke softly. She's flourishing, Desmond. Her teacher says she's reading 2 grade levels ahead and showing real leadership qualities. She's resilient, Desmond agreed. Like her mother in the best ways, and none of the worst. It was as close as he ever came to acknowledging the complex genetic inheritance Lily carried. The charm, intelligence, and determination that had been Valentina's gifts, separated from the pathological narcissism that had twisted those qualities toward destruction. Rosa squeezed his hand briefly in silent acknowledgement of what remained unspoken between them. Their shared vigilance for any signs that Lily might have inherited more than just her mother's amber eyes and quick wit. So far, those signs had been blessedly absent. Lily showed normal empathy, formed healthy attachments, and processed disappointments with appropriate emotion rather than calculated revenge. The therapist who had monitored her development since the tragedy described her as remarkably well-adjusted given her history, words that had brought Desmond more relief than any business success ever could. After the site visit, as Desmond drove Lily home while Rosa returned to her volunteer work at a local literacy program, his phone rang through the car speakers. Boyd McAllister. Hey, Boyd. You're on speaker with Lily, Desmond said, a warning for his security consultant to keep the conversation appropriate. Hi, Miss Lily, Boyd said warmly. How's the smartest third grader in Oakdale today? Good. I just helped pour concrete at Daddy's new building, Lily replied, carefully pronouncing the word Desmond had taught her. Sounds exciting. Listen, Desmond, I just wanted to confirm our meeting tomorrow about the Seattle expansion. Nothing urgent. We're still on, Desmond confirmed, recognizing Boyd's coded message. Their Seattle expansion discussions were actually updates on the network of surveillance and protection measures that Boyd maintained around Desmond's family and business interests, a security apparatus that had grown increasingly sophisticated over the years. After dropping Lily at her piano lesson, Desmond drove to his office downtown, his mind already shifting from father mode to the calculated precision that characterized his business persona. His assistant, Marion, met him at the elevator with a stack of messages in his afternoon schedule. The foundation board meeting starts in 20 minutes, she reminded him. And Mr. Walsh called to confirm your dinner meeting at the grill. He says he has interesting news about Pierce Kavanaugh. Desmond's stride faltered almost imperceptibly at the name. Pierce had been imprisoned for almost 2 years now, serving his sentence at a medium-security federal facility in Colorado. Desmond had deliberately avoided seeking information about him, considering that chapter of his life firmly closed. Did he say what kind of news? He asked, resuming his pace toward his office. No details, Marion replied. Just that you'd want to hear it in person. The foundation meeting, focused on distributing grants from the charitable organization Desmond had established in Lily's name, occupied the next 2 hours. By the time he arrived at the grill, an upscale steakhouse favored by Oakdale's business elite, Terrence Walsh was already seated at their usual corner table, nursing a scotch. You're looking well, Terrence observed as Desmond took his seat. The ruthless tycoon lifestyle clearly agrees with you. Desmond smiled thinly at the characterization, which wasn't entirely inaccurate. The business press had taken to describing him in increasingly dramatic terms as Reeves Holdings expanded its reach. Uncompromising, strategic, the chess player of urban development. What they meant, but were too polite to say directly, was that he had developed a reputation for absorbing struggling companies, retaining their valuable assets while discarding anything, or anyone, that didn't meet his exacting standards. You said you had news about Pierce, Desmond said, bypassing small talk after ordering his usual bourbon. Terrence nodded, his expression growing more serious. He's dead, Desmond. Apparently committed suicide in his cell 3 days ago. Hung himself with a bedsheet. Desmond absorbed this information with unsettling calm, awaiting the surge of satisfaction or relief that should accompany news of his enemy's demise. Instead, he felt nothing. No triumph, no closure, not even the grim acknowledgement that justice had been served. "I see," he said finally. "Any indication why now?" He still had 10 years left on his sentence. "That's where it gets interesting," Terrence replied, leaning forward slightly. The day before his death, he received a letter. Prison authorities won't disclose the contents, but my contact says it devastated him. He didn't eat, didn't speak to anyone, and then was found dead the next morning. "A letter from whom?" Desmond asked, though he already suspected the answer. Terrence met his gaze directly. "The return address was your office, Desmond." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Desmond took a deliberate sip of his bourbon. "I didn't send Pierce Kavanaugh a letter, Terrence. I haven't had any contact with him since his sentencing." "I figured as much," Terrence acknowledged. "But someone wanted him to think you did. Someone who knew exactly what to say to push him over the edge." "Do we know who actually sent it?" "Not yet, but I have people looking into it." Terrence's expression was carefully neutral. Should I be concerned about what they might find? The question hung in the air, laden with implications. Desmond considered his response carefully. "I didn't orchestrate Pierce's suicide, if that's what you're asking. I had no reason to. He was already paying for his crimes, and I had moved on." Terrence nodded slowly. "And if someone in your organization took it upon themselves to tie up that loose end, then they acted without my knowledge or approval," Desmond said firmly. The statement was technically true. He had never explicitly ordered anyone to torment Pierce to the point of suicide. But he had cultivated a corporate culture where loyalty to Desmond Reeves meant anticipating his interests and acting accordingly. He had surrounded himself with people who understood that threats to his family or business were to be eliminated with extreme prejudice. And he had demonstrated repeatedly that he rewarded initiative when it came to protecting what was his. If someone in his organization had decided that Pierce Kavanaugh remained a potential threat and had taken steps to permanently neutralize that threat, well, that would be unfortunate, but not entirely surprising. "I'll look into it," Desmond promised, his tone making it clear the matter was closed for now. Terrence accepted this with the pragmatism of a longtime legal fixer. "There's something else you should know. Pierce left a sealed letter with his attorney to be delivered to you in the event of his death." This did surprise Desmond. "What does it say?" "No idea. It was delivered to your office this morning. Confidential, attorney-client privilege, and all that." Terrence studied him over the rim of his glass. "Whatever it contains, I'd suggest reading it in private." When Desmond returned to his office after dinner, he found the letter waiting on his desk. A simple white envelope with his name typed on the front, bearing the letterhead of Pierce's attorney. He opened it carefully, half expecting some final attempt at manipulation or revenge. Instead, he found a single handwritten page in Pierce's distinctive architectural script. "Desmond, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Probably by my own hand, though in a way, we both know that's not entirely true. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What Valentina and I plan to do to you is unforgivable. The risks I took with people's lives through my fraudulent practices were unforgivable. I've had 2 years in this cell to reflect on the man I became, and I can find no justification that absolves me. What you may not know, what I've never told anyone, is that I genuinely loved Valentina. Not the person she pretended to be, but the broken, dangerous woman she really was. I saw behind her mask early in our affair, recognized the darkness there because it mirrored my own, and still I chose to follow her into the abyss. We deserved each other, but Lily deserved better than both of us. I'm not writing to seek absolution or to ease my conscience. I'm writing because despite everything, I believe you should know that in the end, I understand what I took from you. Trust, security, peace of mind. Things more valuable than money or status or freedom. You won, completely. The man who betrayed you, who conspired to destroy everything you built, is utterly defeated. Not just imprisoned, but broken beyond repair. May that knowledge give you whatever peace is possible after what we did. Pierce. Desmond read the letter twice, then carefully fed it into the shredder beside his desk. Pierce's final confession, his acknowledgement of defeat, changed nothing. The victory had been secured long before this last pathetic attempt at what? Atonement? Connection? It didn't matter. What mattered was that another chapter had closed definitively. Pierce Kavanaugh was dead. Valentina was 3 years in her grave. Angelo Russo had taken his complicity to his own grave. All those who had betrayed Desmond most profoundly had paid the ultimate price. And he had emerged not just intact, but transformed, stronger, more influential, and vastly wealthier than before. The ruthlessness that circumstance had forced upon him had become his greatest business asset. The vigilance that trauma had taught him had protected him from subsequent threats. The protective instinct that fatherhood had awakened in him had guided his every decision, ensuring that Lily would inherit not just material wealth, but a legacy of security and power that no one could easily challenge. 1 month after learning of Pierce's suicide, Desmond finalized the largest acquisition in Reeves Holdings history, a merger with national developer Westland Properties that would triple their portfolio and give them presence in 12 major markets across the country. The business press hailed it as a masterstroke of timing and negotiation. Only those in Desmond's inner circle knew how he had orchestrated Westland's vulnerability over the preceding 18 months, how precisely he had positioned his own company to appear as their only viable savior. The morning after the merger was announced, Desmond took Lily to her favorite breakfast spot, a quirky cafe near their penthouse that made animal-shaped pancakes. As she happily dissected a pancake giraffe, oblivious to the financial coup her father had just executed, Desmond watched her with quiet wonder. She was the one truly good thing to emerge from the wreckage of his first life. This bright, compassionate, fiercely intelligent child who somehow remained untainted by the darkness that had surrounded her earliest years. In protecting her, in ensuring she would never face the kind of betrayal and danger he had experienced, Desmond had found his most powerful motivation. "Daddy," Lily said, looking up from her plate with sudden seriousness, "are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. "What makes you ask that, Lillipad?" She shrugged with the profound simplicity of childhood. "Sometimes you look sad when you think I'm not watching, like you're remembering something bad." Desmond considered his answer carefully. "I'm happiest when I'm with you," he said truthfully. "Sometimes I remember difficult things, but that doesn't mean I'm not happy right now." She seemed to accept this, returning to her pancakes with renewed enthusiasm. "I'm happy too," she declared, "even though I still miss Mommy sometimes." "That's natural," Desmond assured her, maintaining the careful balance he had cultivated in discussing Valentina, acknowledging her loss without demonizing her mother or revealing truths Lily wasn't ready to handle. "Aunt Naomi says you work too hard," Lily continued, her thoughts jumping tracks with childlike directness. "She says you need to find someone special again." Desmond nearly choked on his coffee. "Does she now?" "Uh-huh. She says you're a good catch." Lily giggled at the adult expression coming from her mouth. "Are you going to find someone special, Daddy?" The question hung in the air, innocent yet profound. In the 3 years since Valentina's death, Desmond had deliberately avoided romantic entanglements. Some interpreted this as ongoing grief. Others, who knew more about what had really happened, understood it as caution born of devastating betrayal. The truth was both simpler and more complex. Desmond had reorganized his priorities entirely, placing Lily and his business empire at the center of his existence and leaving little room for anything else. "Maybe someday," he told Lily, unwilling to close any doors that might lead to her happiness. "But for now, I have my hands full with you and work." She seemed satisfied with this answer, returning to the important business of saturating her pancakes with syrup. Desmond watched her, marveling at her resilience and normalcy despite everything she had endured. Later that evening, after Lily was asleep, Desmond stood on his penthouse balcony overlooking the city he had increasingly come to dominate. Lights glittered below, many from buildings that now belonged to Reeves Holdings, others from projects that would soon fall under his influence as the Westland merger was implemented. His phone buzzed with a text from Boyd, package delivered. Issue resolved permanently. Desmond didn't need to ask for clarification. The package referred to a former Westland executive who had been threatening to challenge the merger with allegations of impropriety. Resolved permanently meant the threat had been neutralized, not through violence, which Boyd knew Desmond would never authorize, but through the careful application of pressure to the man's more vulnerable points. Perhaps financial leverage, or evidence of his own misconduct, or threats to his professional reputation. The specific method didn't matter, only the result. Acknowledged, Desmond texted back simply. He returned his gaze to the cityscape, feeling the now familiar sense of calculated satisfaction that had replaced more spontaneous emotions in his life. Not happiness, exactly. Lily had been perceptive in her observation, but something adjacent to it. A sense of order restored, of control maintained, of threats anticipated and neutralized before they could materialize. The man who had once built houses with meticulous attention to detail now built empires. The man who had once trusted implicitly now verified exhaustively. The man who had once believed in second chances now ensured that those who betrayed him never got the opportunity to do so again. The transformation was complete. The old Desmond Reeves, trusting, optimistic, perhaps a bit naive despite his business acumen, had died the night Valentina revealed her true self at the beach house. The man who had emerged from that crucible was harder, colder, infinitely more dangerous to those who crossed him, but also capable of a depth of protective love for his daughter that was the one pure thing remaining from his previous life. As he turned to go inside, Desmond caught his reflection in the glass doors, successful, imposing, untouchable, precisely as he had rebuilt himself to be. The world that had once conspired to destroy him now bent to his will, and those who had betrayed him had paid the ultimate price for their mistakes. It wasn't happiness, perhaps, but it was victory, and for Desmond Reeves, that had become enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.